Hi, I'm Rich Kaplan, and welcome to Inspiration in a Time of Crisis. I lead our employee experience work here at Microsoft. I am a trustee and executive sponsor of the Microsoft Alumni Network. And I'm pleased today that we get to talk with Microsoft's Chris Capossela and United Way of King County's Gordon McHenry Jr. Now, originally, we set out to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic and how Microsoft and the United Way are responding to the crisis. And we will absolutely still do that today. But we can't do that without addressing the epidemic of inequality and what's currently happening around the country. You know, my coworker Megan Carpenter recently said, we have to embrace the discomfort of not knowing, of not being certain, of not understanding, and then be motivated to learn and get better. So today, we start the journey by learning. So let me introduce our panelists. First, Chris Capossela. For those of you who don't know him, we call him Chris Cap. He's Microsoft's Chief Marketing Officer and EVP of the Worldwide Consumer Business. He's in charge of marketing across Microsoft's consumer and commercial businesses, and he oversees the consumer channel sales and advertising, and even the Microsoft Store. More importantly, this year, Chris and his wife, Lee, are serving as fundraising co-chairs of the United Way of King County. Now, also with us today is Gordon McHenry Jr. He's the president and CEO of the United Way of King County, and he stepped into that role just last October. Wow, what a time, just in time to deal with the largest health and humanitarian crisis of our times. But he's no stranger to leading in the nonprofit sector. Before joining United Way, he held executive leadership roles at Solid Ground and Rainier Scholars, and before that, he was an executive at Boeing. And in fact, he's a longtime resident of King County, and he's served on various boards with education and social services. So both of you, thank you for being here. Now, before we start, like many other metropolitan areas around the U.S., we experienced the anger of inequity. We saw it bubble up and present itself in civil demonstrations and unrest. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But I wanted to start with the pandemic. COVID-19 has turned our lives upside down and the lives of everyone around the planet upside down. As I think everyone knows, to date, more than 5 million people have confirmed cases that have been reported, with more than 360,000 deaths globally. Now, those numbers don't really begin to paint the bigger picture of how much the pandemic has disrupted the economy, exasperated social justice issues, altered the way we do things today, and how we'll need to change the way we do things in the future. For those of you who don't know, some of the earliest U.S. cases of COVID-19 were detected right here in King County back on January 21st, so it was early. Since then, we've had more than 20,000 confirmed cases in Washington state and more than 1,100 deaths. It's very sad. However, Microsoft and the United Way of King County were among the earliest organizations to take action regarding the COVID-19 crisis. And they're each working in their own ways to address the social inequities that we have today. So first, let me ask the first question, and I'll ask it of Chris. I'd like you to jump in and talk about how Microsoft responded to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, great. Thanks, Rich. And obviously, thank you for hosting us. To all the Microsoft alums who are joining today, thank you for your time. I know you've got a lot of things that you could be doing, and I really appreciate you listening to a little bit of the story about Microsoft and the United Way and the work that we're doing together to serve underserved people in our community. When it comes to the COVID-19 crisis, it's been, incredible to have a front row seat to the Microsoft senior leadership team and Satya and everything that we're trying to do. Satya has been an incredible leader through all of this. In the beginning stages, we met 7 days a week as a senior leadership team, really to figure out what we needed to do for priority number one, which for us was really protecting and supporting the health and the safety of all of our employees. And over time, we continue to meet. We're now meeting 3 days, 4 days a week, depending on what's going on, and always looking at 4 principles that we have and all the decisions that we need to make within the context of those 4 principles. The first principle being, hey, we have to protect the safety and welfare of our employees. So I think, as you probably know, we quickly moved to a world where we first recommended that people work from home, and now we have moved to mandatory work from home, and we're on week 12 or 13, I think, of that. And we've done a huge amount of work to clean our physical workspaces at our campuses. We do have some essential employees who must come in for cloud operations, for working with governments, et cetera. So we do have people who are coming in for those activities, and we want to keep them incredibly safe. Quickly, Brad Smith and Satya and Amy decided that we should, even though we were essentially shutting down our campuses, we should keep paying our hourly employees and our hourly vendors who provide services for our campus, pay them their full pay, even though we didn't really need to have shuttle drivers and those sorts of things, because we recognized that those employees were going to be ones who were really going to suffer for some large number of weeks.
Can I make a quick comment? I love that Microsoft took a leadership position in that, was one of the first companies that decided they would pay their hourly workers, and it really set the stage for others in the community to do the same thing. So thank you.
Yeah, it was a great move. I wish I had come up with it. It was really Brad and Amy, and then Satya greenlit it in about half a second, and it was great that other people sort of followed suit. For those who can, it's not possible for every company to do that. So sort of job 1 was, protecting our employees. And then job 2 for us, or principle number 2 is, what is it that we can do to help organizations around us? So we've done a lot of work to partner with nonprofits, the United Way being one that's nearest and dearest probably to Microsoft's heart, particularly in King County where so many of our employees live, but also partnering with healthcare providers, healthcare workers, government leaders. And we've done all sorts of things that I think the alumni group may want to know about. Locally in Seattle, we donated $1 million to help launch the Seattle Foundation's COVID-19 Response Fund. We've secured and donated lots of N95 masks and lots of suits and thermometers and goggles and gloves and tons of hand sanitizer and wipes for healthcare providers. We realized that when schools closed, a big thing that schools do is to feed kids who need to be fed breakfast and lunch. And so we reopened our facilities for our cafeterias to start producing box lunches. We're now distributing about 30,000 box lunches a week to Boys and Girls Clubs, food banks, housing centers, and that's obviously incredibly important. We've donated about 12,000 pounds of food to Food Lifeline, and that's mostly here in the Seattle, King County area. But then we've partnered with the CDC and the WHO, and we've deployed technology like a healthcare bot that the CDC is using to answer, thousands and thousands of questions that they're getting hourly that they just don't have the personnel to handle. So they've been able to take the answers and have an automated bot do that, which is really, really cool. And then Brad has basically taken our AI for Health initiative, where we've earmarked $20 million to put those funds to COVID-19 nonprofits and COVID-19 research to obviously help with finding a vaccine. So the response has it's been unbelievable to be part of this thing, and it's made me so proud to see what Microsoft is actually capable to do, even though we know it's just a drop in the bucket for what the real needs are.
And I do know both alumni and employees are also reaching out and helping. I love obviously the direct donation. Food and money is a great thing, but also using technology is also quite an amazing way to help in ways that people haven't thought of before. United Way King County has played a key role in Microsoft's philanthropic efforts, I know really over 3 decades. Chris, you and your wife, Lee, are this year's fundraising co-chairs. Tell us about your role in Microsoft's history with the organization.
Yeah, I mean, as most Microsoft people know, Bill Gates and his family, his mom, were just huge supporters of United Way. So when I joined Microsoft, 28 years ago or something, I had never done anything as it related to philanthropy. And one of the first things I heard was that Microsoft has this giving campaign, and the United Way is one of the organizations that Bill and other leaders encouraged us to give to. And over the past 28 years, I've gotten to know the organization better, and I was really honored when they asked Lee and I if we would spend a bunch of time and money with United Way this year in particular to help raise $41 million was our goal through June of this month. We're sort of on the docket to try to hit that number by the end of June. And one of the things that blew me away was through this role, and we follow in the footsteps of Jeff and Tricia Rakes, who did this many years ago, and then Brad and Kathy Smith did this a handful of years ago as the co-chairs. You're basically getting to know the programs that the United Way puts in place. You're getting to know the nonprofits that the United Way supports, and you're explaining to people what the United Way is doing for the community and what the problems are that the United Way is trying to tackle. So, when I look at the homeless population that we have in just Seattle alone, forget about the entire state of Washington or the United States, it's an incredible problem. And the United Way has very innovative ways to stop people from becoming homeless in the first place, as well as to help people who are homeless try to find shelter, try to get them training, get them a job, keep them from becoming homeless again. The work they're doing around poverty, the work they're doing around feeding hungry people, simple programs like tax programs to get people the tax refunds that they actually deserve but may not know how to do, how to keep people in school and make sure kids graduate from elementary school, from middle school, from high school, from community college. It's been just an awesome experience to see how smart people are taking funds and applying really innovative programs to scale. And that's one of the things we love about the United Way is it's community-led. It's a community-led approach. It focuses on three of our biggest problems, which is homelessness, education, and poverty. And it does it in a way that brings about legislative change too. These programs aren't programs that should last forever. And that, I think, is just been awesome to see. And Microsoft's been all over it. We have lots of incredible people who are dedicated to it. We have 1,300 Microsoft employees who are part of this cool Emerging Leaders program to encourage young people like me 28 years ago to start to begin to understand the importance of volunteerism and the importance of, a buck a day can make a huge difference in making this community a safer place. And most of our programs are serving people who have Black and brown skin, African American, Black population, Hispanic, Latinx population. So what's happening in the world around violence and around protests, the United Way is at the center of systematic change to try to improve the lives of the people who need it the most. And that is super inspiring for Lee and me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Microsoft's mission to empower every person and organization on the planet to do more. And when I heard you speak, I realized, yes, that's alignment to empower others to be successful. Just even in basic things, addressing the need for food, the need to address homelessness, to address communities that are underrepresented. Thank you again for sharing that. Gordon, there are so many urgent needs coming to light during the crisis. And the situation has been changing quickly. How have you seen conditions evolve over the past couple of weeks?
Well, that's a great question, but first let me just say how appreciative I am and our entire United Way staff are to be able to join you, Rich, and Chris, and Microsoft alumni in this conversation. I can't, we've talked about this for a while, but inspiration with all of the challenges that are currently underway and currently we're feeling and experiencing, really important. So thank you. To answer your question, COVID, came upon this community rapidly, and the economic dislocation is the one that at United Way we are experiencing and working the most around. So there's a lot of health issues, and those are really, really important and critical. but it's the economic dislocation that we've noticed the most. And it shows up in a couple of areas that you've already, and Chris have already talked about, which is our housing instability and homeless challenges, and the fact that a good percentage of folks in King County and throughout the state struggle with feeding themselves and feeding their families on a regular basis, and even more so because of COVID. So just for example, with the rental assistance, we were doing eviction prevention before COVID and had a really innovative program as a part of our homeless prevention, keeping people from becoming evicted with lots of support from lawyers and social workers. Well, when COVID happened, we knew people were going to struggle to pay rent because there's so many people where that's already their reality. And sure enough, we raised with some great support from people like from donors, from corporations, Microsoft being one of the lead, the city and the county. We raised about $5 million, and we said we think we can help about 2,000 households in King County with their April rent. We opened up the application, online application on a Friday, and by the Monday, 72 hours later, we had over 7,000 people, 7,000 households who had said, I need help. We figured it out. It was about 6,800 folks that were able to apply. We're still working with those households to help them with their April rent and now, of course, May rent. And as you can look at the calendar, we're in June, and many of these families are saying they need help with rent in June. And those applications that came in, about 600 were from students who are currently enrolled in one of our 10 community colleges. So, you know, it's really showing up a lot. And the last thing I'll say is that just to that one snapshot, 72% of the applications for rental assistance were from households of color. Even though that's like 2.5, 3 times the representation in our community. 52% were families. So it just shows how COVID has really exacerbated underlying issues that are that existed and that do exist in our county. Very much the most vulnerable are our communities of color, immigrant and refugees, and they're being devastated right now.
Yes, it's a very tough and humbling time. I know everyone feels pain right now. And I know one of the things you guys are doing is actively fundraising for the Community Relief Fund. So you talked about rental assistance. Where else are you guys organizing or focusing your efforts?
One of the areas that we're very active in is in food. So I mentioned that, you know, before COVID, if you just look at youth, probably 15% or so of youth who are in schools suffer from food insecurity, a fancy way of saying that they and their families don't have a good plan on how to get food, or that they are participating in the free and reduced meal programs that schools host. And so, of course, schools are out. And that number has grown to more than 20%, heading toward a quarter. So we've been working a lot on food. We work with partners like Fair Start and YMCA, but recognizing the race and ethnic disproportionality that exists in King County and the intersection with poverty, we've oriented our food work so that the food that we are working to get prepared and delivered goes into our public housing communities. We started first with the Seattle Housing Authority, and now we're broadening that to King County Housing Authority because that's where there's a convergence of people who are living on very low incomes, people of color, students and families who are actively participating in the free and reduced meal program. So that's one area that we are working, and we're going to be doing that throughout the summer. United Way always does the summer meal programs. You probably see those in your community, and we're ramping those up now. We're also working with coalitions of small minority-owned, small minority-led nonprofits. So we have a couple different groupings. One is called the Racial Equity Coalition. Another one is a group of minority-led nonprofits that work in early childhood and helping with daycare and home health and all that. And so we're working with them and putting money specifically with them so that they can work with their specific communities on issues that community says are most prevalent, most exacerbated by COVID, and then use our dollars in ways that directly address those unique needs. And so we've been doing that. Part of that money we raised for the rental assistance, $500,000 went to this racial equity coalition so they could figure out the best way to make it work in their specific communities. So we're going to keep working on that. When you're in community and listening, you learn a lot. You learn where the hurt is, and you learn from the community what's the best way to work with them as a partner. And that's something we're committed to.
I love the dynamic nature of how quickly you guys have responded and adjusted based on needs, and it's just great to see that. Chris, I have a question for you. The United Way at King County is continuing to work on its virtual environment, and during this crisis, I'm not even sure I would have thought of. Well, what does it mean to have a virtual environment to help during this crisis? But given that everyone is social distancing, of course it's super important. Can you explain what that is?
I've just been super impressed with how the United Way has pivoted so incredibly quickly, not just to the programs that they do, which I think are more important than ever with COVID, but actually the way they do their work moved to virtual practically overnight. And Lee and I obviously are working with the organization, lots of people in the organization, and they're big users of Microsoft Teams, which is obviously wonderful for us to see as Microsoft. But, the free tax prep program is one of my favorite programs where people who are good at doing taxes, they don't have to be a finance expert, essentially volunteer to do people's taxes for them. That's now happening completely online. And that program typically brings tens of millions of dollars in tax refunds to people who deserve them. One of my favorite programs they do is the Bridge to Finish program. This is a program that's really geared towards kids in community colleges who may not be able to finish because they have to take time off to take care of a sick family member, or they don't have money for next tuition. And that's moved 100% virtual as well. They're providing virtual support, rental assistance, food assistance, tax help, cash grants, emergency cash grants, access to technology for people in community college who need that help. That's become totally virtual, which is pretty amazing. You also look at something like the Parent Child Plus program, which was really something Brad and his wife Kathy were huge advocates for. And this is bringing home visits of people into people's homes to play with their children, read to their kids before they start kindergarten. That's become 100% virtual too. And they're doing literally all of their visits virtually. And so they just haven't missed a beat. We're very pleased and proud that they're using Microsoft Teams to make all this happen. But more importantly than the technology, the whole organization, it's literally just flipped, and they continue to provide their services. Very, very inspiring to me.
That is very inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. And Gordon, thanks for your leadership in this. I mean, I know you're still pretty new in the organization, but wow, you guys responded quickly. Now, you mentioned the conditions before the pandemic part, in making people and families vulnerable now. Can you give us a quick snapshot of what that looked like?
Sure. As Chris indicated, a lot of our work is in the areas of homelessness and housing, students graduating, so the education arena, and then, of course, dealing with the pervasiveness of poverty. And so just for an example, I think most of us know that we have a homeless crisis in our community. We don't talk a lot about the housing instability that exists, and that's where somebody who is not yet homeless but are just days, weeks, or a month away from being homeless, or that they're already doubled up sleeping with a friend or a relative member, but they're not in their home. And so that existed. We did this 1 year into this home-based eviction prevention. Keep you from, if you're evicted in our community, there's like an 80% likelihood you'll be homeless within 4 months. And so we worked with over 1,000 households to prevent their eviction in just 1 year. But of that number, more than 50% were communities of color, when the communities of color make up only 1/3 of all the renters in King County. So again, that disproportionality. The food insecurity, when you have on an ongoing basis that 15 to 20% of all the students in King County, actually across the state, are food insecure. That's not healthy. That's hard on the families. It's hard on our society. We serve over 250 summer meal sites. We set up over 250 meal sites to serve more than 500,000 young people last summer. So those are issues that existed before COVID. In the community college, everybody says, "Oh, you're in college. You're pursuing. You're going to go from minimum wage to living wage." Well, the vast majority of our students in the 10 community college schools, universities in our region, they are living on low incomes. They're living on fixed incomes. They are first in their family to pursue college. So a lot of vulnerability there, and those are just a few examples.
Yeah, and you only have to walk around the University of Washington, the U District, to see and feel both the homelessness and the need there. You know, so it's just it was a difficult time before, and now it's a more difficult time. And sadly, you know, racial inequalities have existed obviously for a very long time. It's much more, I mean, only looking this weekend, it's much more spotlighted even now. And it's in the headlines. It's clear racism. So tell me how racial inequity is a factor as the crisis unfolds, and which communities do you think are the most vulnerable right now?
Sure. You know, right now we're having we're having reactions, as we should, and we're having conversations to a very egregious act that was rooted in systemic racism, you know, that our system has aspects of racism built into it. But when you hear people talk about disproportionality, that's a polite way of saying that there are inequities, harms that exist that are correlated to your race, your ethnicity, and oftentimes your geography. And that happens in King County every single day. And it shows up in so many different areas, but we track this in areas of the economy, housing, education, food. There's health disparities, educational opportunities, educational achievement, and of course, criminal and juvenile justice systems. And all of those have, if there's a negative aspect or an outcome, all of those can be correlated to race and ethnicity, and I'm including immigrant and refugee populations as well. And so it's appropriate that people are very focused on that now, but they need to understand these things existed before Mr. Floyd, and unless we work on them very intentionally, they will continue to exist. And it's been exacerbated by COVID-19 because of the increased challenge of health impacts and the rapid dislocation when people were laid off, they were furloughed, hours were reduced, or they've been told, you know, you normally do this kind of work. We're not going to have that kind of activity this spring or summer, maybe not in the fall. They have no income and no plan for income because they were in one of those frontline populations, frontline employment areas that's been precluded because of COVID. So that's why we're at United Way with all of our grantees. We do all this work in partnership. We're focused on who are the most vulnerable and how can we provide the support and the assistance, and many times that is cash or it's food. How can we provide that support that's needed right now and will be needed certainly through the summer?
Thanks for sharing that. You know, one of our goals as leaders certainly is to provide hope and opportunity for others. And so I'm thankful for the both of you and for our alumni who reach out into the community and help others. But, you know, over the past week, there's been a lot of unrest and anger in light of the identity-based hate and violence. And so, Chris, I have a question for you. What is Microsoft doing directly supporting the Black and African-American communities right now?
It's such a great question, and as you said, a really terrible time right now. I mean, the first thing we wanted to do is to make sure that people know that we believe there's no place for hate or for racism in our society. So, using our voice, using our platforms, our owned channels, if you will, to make that clear. And the way we decided to do that was to essentially allow our African American and Black employees' voices to come through, and then have people like Satya, myself, the Microsoft social handles essentially elevate those voices with the millions and millions of people who follow those handles. And so starting this week, we've sort of started a series of amplifications of things that our own employees who are members of the African American and Black community have written or shared that then we are essentially amplifying. And when you think about our mission of empowerment, we want to empower African American and Black people here in our hometown, but really around the United States and the world, to have a platform for others to learn from others to deepen their understanding of. And so that is one of the core things we're doing, is to empower our employees to share, and then to encourage our entire employee population to lean in, to show their support, to show their love, to show that they're going on their own journey to learn about equity and inclusion, whether it's reading books or watching documentaries or having discussions in the workplace. Just reaching out to people who feel so in pain right now and telling them that we care about them, we want to help them, we want to learn from them, I think is quite important. At a company level, we're doing a whole bunch of important work. I think the most important work we're doing is to work to improve our own representation of African American and Black people inside the company. And that's something we can measure in the United States, and we want to do that at every single level of the company. But we're also supporting something called the Criminal Justice Reform Initiative, where we're, as normal, investing in partnerships. It's not something we should or can do ourselves, and to drive basically reform around the criminal justice system with a focus on policing. And we've picked a handful of partners like the Vera Institute, the Urban Institute, and Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, or LEAD, as it's called, to apply our technology, our know-how, to help them with what they're trying to do around criminal justice reform. And that's a great set of steps. It's not enough. We all need to do more. But we are doing things at the individual employee level, using our voice broadly, and then using our money and our technology to try to bring around societal change. And that's obviously in addition to the work we're doing with the United Way, whose programs I do think are trying to counter the incredible systemic racism that we see that's hurting people of color.
I'm so thankful for both of what you're doing. In this difficult time, I hope that when people can't see the light, that we are providing direction and insight to help them see the light, and that potentially, this is a tipping point that drives that important change. Now, Gordon, I also know you guys have other relationships with other nonprofits and agencies. Can you tell us about those relationships?
Sure. Some things United Way that Chris talked about, United Way does, we do, we call it direct service. So we do it ourselves. A lot of time it's with AmeriCorps and Vistas, young people, generally young people, right out of college who have dedicated a year or 2 years to community service. But the vast majority of our work in the community, we do it in partnerships with other nonprofits, and many of them that I'm sure the alumni would recognize by name. And so we pick nonprofits who have a great trust in specific communities, or who are doing really impactful work in our areas of housing and education and breaking the cycle of poverty. And what we did was as COVID hit, we said, we thought we talked about you using our money to do things a certain way. We trust you. You use the money in the best way you see fit. And then let's figure out where we are later in the year. So we did move to increase flexibility in terms of how our grantees respond to the emerging needs in the community. We've done listening sessions and more specific engagements with the nonprofits who are working with our most vulnerable communities, the communities of color, traditionally living on very low incomes, new to our community, immigrant and refugee. So we're doing a lot of listening and trying to understand how we can work with them. In the very beginning, I think you spoke about it. There was the Seattle Foundation hosted the Coronavirus Response Fund. I don't know if people know that in the week before that got started, it was one of your leaders at Microsoft that wrote to me as head of United Way and to Tony Mestris as head of the Seattle Foundation saying, in times of crisis, it's generally United Way and the Seattle Foundation that step forward. Mm-hmm. What do you two leaders want to do about that? And both Tony Mestris and myself said, we've been thinking about this. We've talked about collaborations. Let's get a conversation going. And within a couple of days, we were talking with amongst ourselves and with Microsoft. And very soon after that, we agreed the Seattle Foundation would host that Coronavirus Response Fund, and United Way would partner with them. We would not be competing. We would partner together, and we would help them as they would host it, and we would help them design the grant process. So when the money came in, it could be quickly evaluated and put right back in the community. And I'm very proud that, and I hope the alumni take a moment of pride that it was a Microsoft leader who very quickly and appropriately said, I'm asking for your help and leadership, or maybe I'm challenging you into leadership. And it was a great encouragement. And I think it reflects on the best of what goes on in King County, that we have strong partnerships with corporations and philanthropy. And we've continued that work with the Seattle Foundation, and at the same time started our own fund, our Community Relief Fund, to help with focused funds around rental assistance and around food. And but still a great collaboration that continues with a lot of appreciation to Microsoft for that encouragement.
Gordon, to build on that thought, for people who don't know, Tony Mestris runs the Seattle Foundation. Tony Mestris is one of our Microsoft alum. And so to your point, coming together as a community helps drive impact. And frankly, I've said it before, and maybe I'm being repetitive, but I'm hopeful as a society and as a region that we all learn from this. So, Chris, I'd ask, tell me the positive things that you believe will come from this.
Well, boy, there are some that are specific to Microsoft. Obviously, you mentioned you hoped this was sort of a tipping point as it relates to us addressing some of the systemic racism that's existed in the country for 400 years. And so some of the things that I think will benefit the commercial world feel small in comparison to what we hope we can do from a systems perspective. There's no doubt that we were on a path to have a very successful fundraising year this year. And when COVID struck, because of the incredible generosity of this community, we saw just an amazing outpouring of additional support. And Gordon, can second this. A lot of that support came from people who had already supported the organization, the United Way. And so I am hopeful that in times of crisis like this, people will respond. They will respond by getting involved. They'll respond by opening their pocketbooks. They'll give money to the organizations that are doing the very best work, and they'll give money and vote and be part of the political process that I think is so important for us to change the systems that we all participate in and depend on. And if there's one thing that this has raised, it shows you the economic crisis that's being created. There's a healthcare crisis for people of color, both African American, Black, and Latinx people, Native American people. The systems we have in place, from education to healthcare to sheltering, they are not equal. They are not serving the people equally of our community. And so obviously my biggest hope is that the pandemic, along with the racial injustices that people are raising their voices against, will spur people to act. And that means acting in the way they vote. That means acting in the way they volunteer, in the way they give money. There's no doubt from a systems perspective, people are becoming far more digital. Organizations are becoming far more digital. When we see healthcare advancing every week in ways that we thought would take 2 years, we're very optimistic that the digital tools that companies like Microsoft can put in the hands of commercial entities can make them far better than they were just 10 weeks ago. And, that isn't about systems change and racial injustice, but it is about being able to serve far more people. And that, I think,
right.
is possibly a good thing.
Right. Gordon, is sort of same question. What are you seeing? What do you think will be positive that you believe will come from this?
When we talk, in fancy terms, corporate or philanthropy, about underserved populations, about disproportionality. We're talking about neighbors. These are our neighbors for this conversation here in King County, and they're suffering. They've been suffering quietly. There's this concept of othering, O-T-H-E-R-I-N-G. When you think about, the outrage that's occurring right now, it's because there are people in our community that feel like they don't belong, and that they can be mistreated and there's no accountability. So I'm hoping that COVID, and very sadly, the situation that's occurring right now with the outrage over the law enforcement challenges, that helps us remember that we're talking about our neighbors and that we have a shared destiny. Chris hit it on the head. They were talking about the digital divide, a decade ago. And so COVID came along, schools shut down, and you have families, principally people living on low income and communities of color saying, how can we keep up? Because we don't have the technology to allow us to work from home.
Right.
Well, is that right that you don't have that? And then you say, well, maybe for short term, I'll go to the library. Well, the libraries were closed. And the health centers, the community centers were closed. So what does that say to that family, that we don't really belong? And yet, as a society, we knew this existed. So I think we as a society recognizing that there's a lot of opportunity to work on some very basic issues. We shouldn't have a technology divide. We shouldn't have 15 to 20% of our students hungry every week before COVID. We are a society where to break the cycle of poverty, you need good employment, living wage employment. That requires education. So let's keep working on some of these fundamentals, and let's be really explicit that there are haves and have-nots, and that sadly this is a reflection of a society that has a lot of racism and oppression designed into it. But if we're real about that and we work on it and we use this crisis as a call to action, I have hope we can be a better society after this period of COVID, because we'll be aligned on what are the issues and we'll be committed to work together as helping our neighbors.
Yeah, I see people, you said it, I see people coming together. It's an opportunity to come together on a set of common goals. And crisis does that. What I'd like to do now, if it's okay, is I'm going to take some of the questions out of the question window. So the first one is how is United Way involved in all of Washington, or is your organization just focused clearly on King County? I mean, I know we have issues everywhere, but can you explain how that works, your relationship to the state as a whole?
Sure. I am familiar with All in Washington, and we've been a part of those conversations it was all in Seattle, and then it has evolved to All in Washington, which I think is great, consistent with Rich's point about people coming together and Chris talking about people coming together. We're United Way of King County, but there's a United Way of Snohomish County, United Way of Pierce County. There's the United Way of the Pacific Northwest, where we all come together and talk about common issues. So if this person chooses to invest in All in Seattle, they can designate funds to go to the United Way where they live or where they have a relationship. Maybe it's because their mother or their father lives in Whatcom County or in Walla Walla. So sure, I think that's a great call to action. I think I'm happy that we have people who are saying, let's come together. Let's understand the importance of dollars raised and reinvested in the community can make a difference for our entire state. and we are a part of that.
Great, thank you. So another question, someone asked, besides donating, not everyone can donate, it's a difficult time for everyone. What other ways can individuals support the United Way?
I have an answer, but I'll see if Chris wants to answer, and then I'll follow.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. Volunteering is just an awesome way to help, and there are still several in-person and some virtual opportunities. There's this cool thing called the Washington Mask Challenge. So, getting involved that way, believe it or not, just volunteering to help with tax returns is a really simple but very powerful way to do that. Doesn't involve any, you don't have to pay for that opportunity. The United Way has wonderful volunteer opportunities on their website. If you just go to the homepage, uwkc.org, you'll see a bunch of those. So that's a short and simple answer, volunteering.
Yep, exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
Okay, there you go. Based on what you know today, how do you see the needs increasing in the next 6 months? And what's your outlook and how you are set up to support the needs within the programs you have in place today?
If I can start that one, I see housing instability in the form of rental assistance and then in the form of eviction prevention being critical issues over the next several months. As I indicated before, there are many people in our community who struggle every month to pay rent because the cost of living in central Puget Sound has increased so fast over the last several years. I think I see that continuing, that there are moratoriums at the local and state and national level on evictions. Most of those are expiring in the next couple of days. So that means that landlords who have a contractual relationship obviously have the ability and the right to ask for any rent that's owed to be paid and to be paid very quickly. So I see that once the moratoriums are lifted, there'll be a lot of folks who are, if they can't pay, and let's look at the unemployment rate right now, that are be facing eviction. And so we'll be very busy with working with our renters and the landlords and how to avoid a eviction, which just makes it harder for the whole community. And I think the food issue that we talked about. So we're still raising money, and I think people who can contribute know that the need continues to grow, and that's why United Way has our Community Relief Fund. So we ask for support in terms of donations, and we ask for support in terms of volunteerism.
Agreed. Thank you. For those of you who don't know, I'll just build on what Gordon said. You can go to www.uwkingcounty or uwkc.org/donate. uwkc.org/donate if you're interested in giving. And we absolutely want everyone to stay connected. Donate your time, donate money, whatever you can. In fact, I know Microsoft alumni carry with them Chris brought it from Microsoft, the strong ethos of social responsibility from their time at Microsoft. And it's one of the pillars of the Microsoft Alumni Network as well. So the Microsoft Alumni Network has made a $10,000 grant to United Way of King County's COVID Fund. I know there are alumni who would like to know more about how they can get involved. So just in closing, both to Chris and Gordon, what do we want alumni to go do if they can right away? I know they want to help, and so I'd just like your final thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say, obviously donating time and money is just a wonderful thing to do, and I've certainly never regretted a second of it or a dollar of it that I have donated. It makes a big difference. I'd also encourage you to follow the United Way of King County on the social platform of your choice. They do a really nice job, and it wasn't until I took a closer look that I realized how much I could learn and understand what was going on, just to raise my own awareness of what's happening in King County and the work they do. So those would be my 3 asks: volunteer time and money. And I would say, follow UWKC, your United Way of King County, on Twitter, Facebook, etc.
Great, thank you. Gordon, same question.
Same thing that Chris said. If please, if you can, stay informed, follow us, give of your time, give of your money, and then I would say, Microsoft is a leading local employer. The number of employees and alumni is large, so please share what you learn, and if you're excited by what we're doing or inspired by what we're doing, please share that within your network.
So thank you, Gordon. One of the goals of the Microsoft Alumni Network is to keep people connected. And so to reinforce both what Chris said and that Gordon said, absolutely stay connected, and we will stay connected with you. In closing, I just wanted to say I'm so thankful for Microsoft and for the Microsoft Alumni Network to their commitment to the community. I'm also thankful to both of you, Chris Kapp and his wife Lee, for leading our partnership with United Way. And it was great to meet and hear from Gordon around his leadership at United Way of King County. I said it before, but Gordon has lived and been an advocate for this community his whole life. And lastly, I want to thank you guys, Microsoft alumni. Your giving, your commitment to the community makes such a force for good. So if you would like to learn more, again, follow United Way of King County, UWKC, or go to the website uwkc.org/donate. And then finally, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you, everybody, for spending time with us today.
Thank you all.
Thanks.